I'm back working on the 150. In this video, I plan to make it drive. I've got the battery box in, I've got the generator in. The bracket's not right, but it works for now. I got a PCV hooked up to where the road draft tube goes for now, and it just runs up into the air cleaner. I'm not sure if that's how I'm gonna leave it. I've got the throttle linkage hooked up, and I need to get the shift linkage and the clutch linkage set up. I stole some parts off of this car for the shifter because this car is going to get a 4-speed and I won't need those parts. Alright, I jacked up the car. I laid down this mat so I don't have to work in the mud as much, and I'm going to put in the clutch linkage and the shifter linkage, and then I'll be ready to start putting the transmission in. I've got two transmissions here that I'm taking apart and making into one. One of them was a Buick overdrive transmission, and the other one was a regular Chevy 3-speed. And on the Buick, the piece around the input shaft that locates the transmission in the bell housing has a smaller diameter than the Chevy one. So I'm changing that out. And also, this overdrive transmission that I want to use had a couple of chipped gears, so I'm taking those out of the other transmission and going to make one hopefully good transmission. Alright, the transmission's back together. It shifts how it's supposed to, and I would have liked to completely rebuild it, but at least it doesn't have any chipped gears, and it's going to fit in my car now. The transmission is ready to be put in. I've got the shift linkage and clutch linkage in place and ready to go. Alright, transmission is in. Got to get it bolted up and get all the linkage hooked up. I'm putting the last bolt in the transmission. It's getting pretty dark, and I think it might start raining again soon. So I'm not sure how far I'm going to get, but the transmission is in. Alright, I'm back to work on the 150. It stopped raining for a while, and I got to get the drive shaft in. I need to put gear oil in the transmission and check the rear end. This thing's got a bunch of really thick grease in here, so I'm going to clean it up and then I'm going to put the drive shaft in. I'm also going to inspect the brake lines to make sure they're all good. I know it's got a leak at this fitting back here, so hopefully it just needs to be tightened or cleaned up. The brake line was actually broken off at the fitting, so I took it apart and cleaned it up, re-flared it, and put it back together. Eventually, all these brake lines will be replaced. Okay, I'm testing to see if the fuel pump is working, so I have it disconnected from the carburetor, And the other side is going into this fuel can, and I'm going to see if it's pumping fuel. When it was running before, I don't think the carburetor was getting fuel to it. It was only running when I would fill up the fuel bowl. Alright, I don't think this fuel pump's any good. And it's been sitting for quite a while, so I'm not surprised. Alright, so I got the old fuel pump out. And I took it apart, and you can see this diaphragm is cracked here. I also double checked that the engine mount bolt that I put in the front of the motor wasn't hitting the fuel pump push rod, and it's not, so that's not an issue. I'd like to rebuild this fuel pump. It's an original style pump for this car, but for now I've got this one. Putting together some fuel fittings for this fuel pump because they're a little different than the old one. This fuel fitting here, I put just a little bit of a flare on the end of the fuel line so that the hose doesn't slip off. I don't have a tool to do the swedge fitting like that, but this will be better than nothing. It's the next morning. It's frosty and cold out here. I'm going to put the car on the ground and keep working. thing ran, and I drove it a little bit around the yard. It's leaking oil from the valve cover, so I need to put valve cover gaskets in it, and then I'm gonna bleed the brakes to try to get those working better. Alright, I bled the brakes on this thing, and I put valve cover gaskets in it so it's not leaking oil everywhere. And now I'm gonna start it up and actually try to drive it again. Maybe we'll go a little further this time. It's smoking quite a bit. I just want to make sure nothing's on fire. I think it's just oil burning off of the manifolds. The car's drivable now, so I'm gonna load it up on the trailer and take it out to a place where we can drive it around a little bit and test things out. The fuel tank was full of rust and really bad gas. I wasn't able to get it working, so I set up this jug temporarily as a fuel can. It's not the safest thing in the world, but I do have a fire extinguisher that I'm carrying with me in the car just in case something happens. I'm going to get the car unloaded, and then before the sun sets, I'm going to take the tractor out to the field where we have a little bit of a track and do some work out there. I plan to make a lot more videos, so subscribe if you're interested. Check out my Instagram for updates and pictures. And thanks for watching.